Let's get into it, guys. We ready?
Yeah.
Born ready.
Welcome to another episode of the Unlocked Podcast. A stellar episode is about to come your way. So if this is your first time listening, buckle up because it's getting ready to get real. Also, fun fact, I don't know what we're talking about today. So welcome to another great episode of the Unlocked Podcast, where we are three business owners from across the globe discussing our experiences with growing and scaling locksmith and security companies from our experiences and perspectives. So maybe you can skip some of the challenges and get right to the good stuff, or maybe we'll learn what the good stuff is on the way. My name is Chad Lingefeld. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina.
I'm Tony Hokinson. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Lars Johnson up in Canada. I am the doorknob salesman extraordinaire. Chad, that's what I think we should be introducing ourselves as.
Doorknob salesman.
Right? People that want to get in the industry. It's not all glamour selling doorknobs. It sounds like it, but I mean.
It can be misleading if you just start with doorknob salesman.
Yeah, when I'm having a drink and I'm chatting with some ladies, that's usually what I go with. It's like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, I sell doorknobs.
And then you just can't keep them away.
See you later.
You forget. You're the ever so polite doorknob salesman.
He is the ever so polite. By the way, if you haven't already, I don't know what episode it was, but it's a few back. You should check it out. That episode that we don't know the number of, to hear our jingle that was provided to us by a listener.
Ladies and gentlemen.
It sounds very similar to that. Thank you.
Right.
I've
been practicing that actually.
It's been a few minutes since we've all seen each other. We were together for quite some time, for about a week. And
enough.
Yeah, and so then we had to take a break, go to our separate corners.
Uh-huh.
And everybody seems like they've been on some adventures. We were just kind of chatting beforehand, trying to figure out the weather situation. We're recording this sometime in late April, and because we're all in different climates, Tony is probably still, you said you're getting ready to have tornadoes, so you go from snow to tornadoes.
Pretty much, yeah.
And that's why you spend most of your time in the sauna there.
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
You gotta stay warm. That's good.
Yeah.
And Lars, you just went and you were hunting geese. Is that what?
I was.
That's very Canadian.
I hung out in North Carolina and y'all and dang and vehicles and decals and all those weird American-only words.
Mm-hmm.
And hung out in Virginia for a little bit up at the Medeco.
Yep.
What's that place? Medical. Right. No, you don't like to drop names there, Chad. So that factory in Virginia that makes
the unnamed factory.
Yes, that makes doorknobs in Roanoke.
Mm-hmm.
Spent some time with our boy Ben. And then, my dad's 75th birthday is coming up. So we went on a hunting trip to northern Alberta. I'll give a little plug for that fella. It's called Claudio Ongaro is an outfitter. And let me tell you, if you have any interest in bird hunting, my God, what a setup.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah, he has a YouTube channel. It's called Hired to Hunt. He has a TV show on Wild TV. It's amazing. It was amazing. So,
just two celebrities hanging out, hunting.
Yeah, you know what? He got me to sign a few things for him.
You're talking about Lars's dad and the guy, right?
Yeah. No, he was like, "Hey, you're the guy from the Unlock podcast with the other two dopes, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's me. I'm the star." And he's like, "Yeah, that was it." Yeah. So it was
end of conversation.
Yeah, it was quite the experience, let me tell you.
I do think it should be noted that we came in second place in a golf tournament. We don't have to get into the specifics, but we did come into second place.
Do we?
No.
Are we proud of that or no?
I mean, it's pretty stellar.
I learned something. Oh. I have tried pretty hard to poke the bear with Chad for how long have I known you, Chad? 10 years? 12 years? Probably around there.
Long enough.
And I occasionally antagonize you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've successfully made you mad before.
Yeah.
I saw that side. It's an ugly side. It got ugly at this golf tournament where it was, I don't think I'll get into details yet. I'll wait
Mm-hmm.
Oh wait, but I saw Chad mad. Chad said some dirty words. And Tony turned around. He's like, I've never heard Chad say that before. So yeah, it turns out I've been trying to be your kryptonite forever, and then maybe it's golf. Competitive golf is your kryptonite.
Anything competitive for sure. Well, speaking of competitive,
Chad, before we get into anything useful, are we going to acknowledge how good we look today?
I mean, we are in uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Tony did a fantastic job. Now we all have most of us have our color uniform on. You just got a gray one? Did you not get a colored?
No, I just got a gray one. Tony, it was.
He just wanted you to blend into your. He wanted you to blend into your chair.
The other one. So Tony wanted to keep the. Yeah. Yeah, just blends into the chair nicely, which again is a great joke for a podcast.
Yeah, he's just a floating head. Tony's hanging out in his sauna. Lars is a floating head, and
Chad is sitting where he usually does with
his bobblehead
homage to himself.
all my Chatskis.
We're all perfectly on brand.
There we go.
Absolutely.
All right. So speaking of competitive, we're going to get into it from a conversation standpoint today. First, and this was a listener request. Correct, Tony? From Australia.
Yeah. Brian.
We're international, boys. Well, I guess I'm from Canada.
Significantly
international. But now we're really international.
Well, speaking of, you guys have a pretty big election today in Canada, right? Yeah. Isn't something happening today?
Oh, hadn't noticed.
Oh, I read an article on Google. I'm not sure what it meant.
We actually have elections. We're not actually just the 51st state. We have
from a listener in Australia, first actions to take a small lock shop to scale.
Yeah.
So thinking back, we've all three, we've talked about this before in other episodes where we came into the company at different stages. And so from a retrospective, knowing now what we know or what we've experienced, if we were to set ourselves back into a situation where it was sub 5-6 employees, what would the first actions that we would take to get the business ready for scale? Is that a good summary as you expected it, Tony?
That sounds better than I would have thought of.
That will pass.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into it. So you just purchased a company or you are an owner of a company that you've got to that point.
Yeah.
Where are the first few things that you would navigate?
Yeah, this is pretty common in our industry, really fragmented, of course. And I'd say the average is probably right around here, 4, 5, 6 in that range. Kind of 8 would be that. A lot of people get to 8, and that's where they exist, and it's a bit of a struggle from there. But 4-person, for a little context for anyone that isn't really maybe in the industry, but 4 people in our industry, you're probably going to have 2 guys on the road that are driving around fixing stuff, selling doorknobs. You're going to have the owner, and they're probably fixing doorknobs a good portion of the time, but they're also doing some of the sales. They're also answering the phone. They're also doing jack of all trades. And then there's probably somebody on the inside either doing accounting or maybe some dispatching, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to guess with 4 people, you've got probably between 6 and 800,000 in revenue. If you got 2 people on the road, it's about 250,000 a truck. So that's kind of the stage we're at. So now you're right in that, you as the owner, you're right in that situation where, you want to work, the biggest cliche in the history of the world, you want to work on the business and not in the business. And you're trying to figure out, how do I get out of the truck? Or do I get out of the truck? What do I do next? Because I think that's a real struggle for the vast majority of the industry. Right? Does that ring true to you, Tom?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would do if I was in that situation, looking back, this is not what we did at all, but would be to
Good start.
Yeah, sit down and figure out, where do you want to get to? What are you aspiring to? What are you planning towards retirement? Are you just getting into this business and you're trying to figure out, I want to grow to 10 million? And why do you want to grow? Figure out what's important to you, what you want this business to turn into, and map out what that looks like.
Get it on paper.
Yeah, figuring out a 5 years is a good time frame, 5 to 10 years, just sometime in the future. Create a vision of what that looks like, and then assign a time frame to that, and just kind of get some perspective on where are we going and why are we going there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that, and I mentioned this a few times. It's probably pretty clear in your head of where you want to go, and the vision, the term vision is, I find it a bit cheesy, but I have a friend who's a bit of a dope that says, said what you say isn't necessarily what somebody else is hearing, and a good way to articulate what you're foreseeing and how you see this going is getting it on paper. Draw a picture. An org chart's another thing. Again, drop the name Traction. That book gives you a nice layout of how things can look. But that's definitely a good start. And I would agree, Tone. It's one of those things that you kind of take for granted because it's so clear in your mind. But if you want to have everyone aligned to that and understand where you're going, that's probably a good place to start. Get a piece of paper, draw it out, and what do we want to do?
One thing that I've noticed consistently with businesses around that size, sub 6 employees or so, is a lack of consistency with a pricing model. That's one area that I think that is, I don't know if I'd classify it as easy, but it's probably one of the easiest things to tackle first. Establish the top 20 services that you do and the products that you service, because what you find is, in the scenario that you said, Lars, earlier, you've got an owner and you've got maybe 2 guys in the field and maybe somebody helping with invoicing or whatever. You will have such a disparity between
3 different prices.
Yeah. And so it makes it very difficult, one, to measure profitability, but 2, for the customers, because they don't really know what they're getting charged. And here's the reason for it, I think, is you deal with a guy that is he's a sole proprietor. He is he's the practitioner, so he's been out there doing the doorknob work. And Tony's a nice guy. He sends me a lot of business, so I'm going to charge him $200 today. Here's somebody new. Maybe I'm going to charge him $175 today because I'm trying to gain more of their business. This guy, Lars, he's obnoxious, and he always calls me at the last minute and demands everything. So
it's theoretical.
Yeah, it's all theoretical. So I'm going to charge him $300 because I'm going to try to persuade him not to get me to come out today, because I don't really want to. I'd rather go home and have dinner tonight. So I'm just going to charge, say, $300 to see if I can force you off. Well, now I've just got 3 complete different pricing models. Right. One for a new customer that I'm trying to bring on. One is more consistent because they bring me business all the time, and then the third that I'm trying to actually avoid somebody. That becomes very difficult to maintain and manage, and it is not a scalable procedure, because the moment you add that third technician, your pricing model's all over the place. That's one. Like, just if I were here today, that's what I would do. Is I would get a consistent price list that I could hand out to my team and update it, every month or whatever. But it would just be a consistent price list. We all charge the same thing.
What tool would you use for that? Because I'm thinking back when we started, I was trying to make it simple, and so we just had SKUs, grade 2 lever. Yeah,
the same thing.
That was it, and it didn't matter what the function, the finish, any of that stuff. This was the price, and that was it, to make it simple. And I think we even had basically a piece of paper that we just photocopy and give it to everyone.
Yeah.
I mean,
we did the same thing at about that size. The next iteration of it, the challenge came into it was a piece of paper, so you had to get rid of the old ones and get the new ones out. So sometimes you would be working from literally different sheets of paper. And so the iteration that we moved to before we went to a full-fledged system was a spreadsheet that was shareable. So, I mean, now you have Google Sheets, you have Microsoft Excel, can all be shared workspaces, and you can have one of the tabs that literally is your price list, and then you can create a resource for people just to be able to select those items and calculate it.
And I'd probably agree, and I'd recommend probably Google, because I think it's free still for just a few users.
Yeah.
Right. So I would go with that. Google Doc. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I would go as far to say, if you're 5 employees or less, start figuring out how to use software to help your business. So find some platform. I mean, you can find a software platform for $10 a month per user.
Yeah.
Find something. Like you hear this all the time that people go through multiple iterations of what software they're using, but I think getting used to using some form of electronic database is important.
Yeah. So to your point, right, a major step would be getting consistent pricing. If you wanted to do it through a simple spreadsheet, or if you wanted to find some inexpensive software that could, but effectively a centralized place that you can keep your pricing structure, at least as a base.
Right.
So what would you do next, Lars?
I was gonna let that jump back to you, Tom. I'm thinking through the pricing. The software pricing is a complicated one, and I'd probably add to that, Chad. There really is a handful of services that we do. I mean, being specific to our industry, okay, recodes. I really, going back to that, maybe the planning part, Tony, you were speaking of earlier, is forecasting, is, figuring out how you want to compensate. Are you going to be a salaried person? Are you going to be a commission-based person? Are you going to be a flat rate company? Are you going to be an hourly company? Right. And I would highly recommend staying away from that hourly version. And it's so much easier. So I think that might be, it's kind of piggybacking on pricing, but I would start again writing out. And I'm a big advocate of, getting everything on paper and making it shareable, portable, whatever word you want to use, so other people can see it. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you probably have got, a fairly visionary mindset where everything makes sense in your head, but maybe not by the time it comes out your mouth. So I would probably start looking at flat rate pricing specifically. I would probably say, okay, a recode, we're going to charge, $40, whatever it is. I would pick, like Chad said, probably pick the top 20 items or top 20 services, commercial recodes, residential recodes, open ups, service and repair, diagnostics, that kind of thing. And then figure out what your cost is, and then figure out how you would, go to market.
Yep.
So that I'm kind of torn because, this is all in hindsight, looking at this and saying this is, how it should have been done.
Yeah.
But I also remember it's mayhem. You don't, and there's also a lot of entrepreneurs that, you've probably seen it floating around on Instagram or a reel somewhere, talking about the thing, isn't doing the thing. Planning about the thing isn't doing the thing. Thinking about, planning about, talking about doing the thing isn't doing the thing. The only thing that's actually doing the thing is doing the thing. So, planning is certainly part of it. Just getting out there and just get running. Just start running. Just start doing stuff, and you kind of figure your path out. So, I'm really torn. I'm all over the board here with
but that's going back to culture index side, right? That's your natural take, is to go and adapt as you learn and experience, which makes a whole lot of sense. It's just a matter of, okay, well, now that you've done that, what is the practical application associated with it? To what you were just saying there on the flat rate side versus hourly rate, I think that's a very valid point that a lot of people go back and forth on. If you would, I don't know if I have a way to post. I might be able to figure out a way to post it on our blog. But if you wanted to reach out to me, I have a flat rate calculator that's just a simple spreadsheet that you can punch in your information and it'll calculate that for you. But you can also Google blog.
Do we have a blog?
Yeah, it's on our website, unlockedpodcast.com.
We have a blog.
We have a blog. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we're a blogger. I'm a blogger.
I'm a blogger and a podcaster.
Doorknob salesman, blogger, and podcaster.
Episode 32. I learned we have a blog. Look at that.
Well,
God, I'm hip.
Okay, so developing a price list, discussing the hourly and flat rate. Another thing that I would add if I were in that position, some of the things that I learned early on was that I had spread myself way too thin because I had way too much responsibility. One of the tools that I used maybe at 25 employees, which I wish I would have had earlier, and I teach this a lot in the classes that I do, is going through a process with KRAs, so key results areas, and it is a way to document all of the things that you're responsible for, and then identify the areas that you need to automate, delegate, and delete, so that you can really refine your focus points. And I think the first point of discussion or the first point of argument that happens whenever you talk to somebody that's running a business with 5 or 6 employees is, I don't have the luxury to automate, delegate, or delete. And that's just a fallacy that we tell ourselves, because we have not been able to figure out a way to focus on the things that really drive the business. And so there's several different exercises out there for it. You can Google that. There's lots of books around it that you can resource, but it's a simple process of getting yourself. And this is the way that I try to explain it. Whenever I talk through it, is if you have trouble leading yourself and getting yourself focused on the things that you're supposed to be responsible for, it's very difficult to lead a team to be focused on what they should be doing. So get yourself in order first, and then you'll be able to hold your team accountable and give direction for the focus that they need to be putting their attention to as well.
Yeah, I think a big thing around that is figuring out not only what you can delegate, but also what you're good at, what your strengths are. What are the last things you're going to delegate? Like know where your strengths lie. Like our 3 strengths are probably all different than each other. So know where you want to be in the business, know what you want to be doing, and then start planning, including in that plan who you want to hire around you and what you need for those roles.
Yeah, I think the big question that my business coach approached me with several years ago was, what are the things that only you can do? Sometimes I think as business owners, we get in this mindset that we have to do everything. But the question comes back as to, what are the things that only I can do, and how do I hire or delegate or delete the things that anybody in the business can do? And to your point, Tony, there are things specifically in Lars' business that only he can do. And then there's lots of things that he's probably doing that anybody else can do. And it's really getting to the point of identifying those. One, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? And then what are the things that only I can do?
Yeah, I agree with this. I'm sitting here and I'm just thinking through what are probably the most common kind of mistakes, and trying to kind of build around that. I think there's a significant weakness in our industry when it comes to understanding accounting and financial, I'll even just say profitability. Maybe that's it. So that's probably the next thing I would recommend, is either sit down, not during tax season, but sit down with your accountant and get a general understanding. Even take a college course, take some kind of education for yourself, professional development around accounting and profitability, and understanding what are your actual costs.
Yep.
And because, Chad, you mentioned there was however long ago we were in Vegas, and we had that conversation, and, kind of got flipped around that, you basically, I think you just said that every book you've ever read about every billionaire, every successful business, it all comes down to the same thing, as they manage their costs.
That's correct. Yep.
Right. And we were given the advice to, manage our relationships upstream rather than downstream, right? Managing your input costs, your cost of goods sold, your inventory, right? Those are the relationships to manage, which, threw me for a loop. But really understanding what your costs are in your business, because generally speaking, a small company isn't charging enough for their time and is paying too much for their inputs. So, and that
100. That's a repeatable statement. That's something that should be framed somehow. I don't know if it was a bit stretched out, but
can you summarize what Lars just said there for us, Chad?
Well, that's what I was trying to process what he just said. What?
Do you want me to say that again?
Yes. Can you say it again? Because it was...
But longer?
No, shorter. because I got distracted in the middle.
Yeah, there was a piece of tinfoil on your desk and you got distracted. Yeah, sounds about right. I was saying getting a general understanding of your expenses, really diving in. How I do this, how I stay involved is I look at an income statement, because you're probably using QuickBooks. That'd be my guess, because most do QuickBooks Online. Look at an income statement, look at a month-by-month income statement line by line, and just click on every account and look at what goes into it. Get an understanding, look at your AP invoices from your vendors, get an understanding of what your actual costs are. Because, and this is the part I think you were referring to, Chet, because in general, small businesses aren't charging enough for the value that they're bringing and are paying too much for their inputs into their business. So they're spending too much and not charging enough. And I mean, that's not limited to small business, but that's certainly, I look back, it's certainly, when we were at, I think I started, we had 15 people. I was number 15. And it, when was the last time we looked at pricing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, 2004.
Yeah.
Right. So it just, that would be it. Get an understanding of pricing and looking at that specifically, your inputs versus your details.
I mean, what you just said again is something because I think for where we're at now, and we're trying to assess pricing on a regular basis, every quarter or whatever, every year for many businesses around that size. But I think back when we were less than 20 employees, I don't remember, especially between 5 and 20, we didn't reassess labor rates ever. We went 5 or 7 years, maybe adjust like a service call or something like that. But we went 5 or 7 years before we went and said, oh, hold on a second, our labor rates are out of whack. Well, we more than tripled the size of our head count. Mm-hmm. Do you think that it costs us more to run the business? And it's just something that was not accounted for because you're focusing, not focusing on what we were spending. We were focused more on what we were trying to generate, and we weren't mitigating the cost associated with it. So it's an easy thing to overlook, forget about, not understand the impact of it, all of those things. I couldn't agree more.
If you're in the locksmith industry, chances are pretty good you're a locksmith. Mm-hmm. And because you're a locksmith, you will focus on getting work done and figuring out what widget to fix and how to do that stuff. And will spend less time on the actual business aspect of it. So that's, just a general rule of thumb, build a habit out of that. But I got a little distracted there. Chad just pulled up his camera to take a big selfie. So
no, I was taking a picture of the screen because I find the irony that Tony is in the middle on my screen.
Yeah, he's always in the middle.
He's not in the middle I'm not in the middle. Mine actually goes in order. We got TLC Tony, on mine here.
Give me something. Give me something.
I was just Googling. I wrote this down.
You're Googling it.
Actually, well, I wanted to see if I was modeling off Traction or if I made it up my own, and it turns out it was both. But every business has 3 major functions. You have your sales function, you have your operations function, and you have your finance and accounting function. And typically, as a business owner, you're going to fall into one of those 3 strengths, right? If you look at locksmiths across the industry, they're either started because they were good at sales, they started because they were good at being a locksmith, or they have a finance background. Chad amazingly started as a locksmith, and Lars and I started from a finance background.
I just saw the sticker that Lars left on my sign here. Is that supposed to be a Canadian flag?
That is.
Oh.
Well, I thought that was Tony, we can get back to your topic in a minute here, but Chad has that homage to himself behind him. So I thought I'd better add a little something to give it some class.
Yeah.
So I put.
Did Tony leave any Easter eggs back here?
No.
Oh, that's
I
funny.
wouldn't be that childish.
Sorry, Tony. I think you were talking. I don't know. Chad got distracted, but you were trying to say something.
Yes. So I was trying to say every business owner will fall into one of three categories: sales, finance, or operations. Right? Chad started as a locksmith. Lars and I started as finance background, and I guess going back to what I was saying earlier, you want to figure out which one of those is your strengths, and then you want to make sure you're hiring around those. But you also, specifically if you're in the operations role, you want to make sure you're training your replacement. So if you're a locksmith, you want to figure out how you're going to replace yourself. What are you going to do to allow yourself to focus more on the CEO role? Yeah. And I think, like you said, I think 8 out of 9 people listening to us here are probably locksmiths by trade. Yep. And figure out how you're going to replace yourself. Make sure you're documenting your processes. Make sure you're hiring your replacement or a couple of them. And that's probably a tough thing for a lot of people to think about is, why do I want to hire my replacement? But you can't grow your business if you can't grow out of the role you're currently in.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to Uncle Glenn because I know he'll be listening to this and pontificating and about all the dopey things that we say here. But, I think, like he has a business, and I think Ann Gruber would be another one that, they really understand their business and they don't waste energy on things that aren't part of their core business. Right. Like Glenn, I think, was the first one to say that, sales are vain. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not the reference, and he's going to correct me on what it really is, but profit is what matters. Right. And everyone talks about sales. So, again, I think maybe I might just be repeating myself, but I think it's just the more I think about it, understanding your costs and really your profits and where it's coming from. And I'd probably then take that into my next recommendation would be understanding my market segments, my verticals, whatever you want to call them. But I would look and say, okay, if we got 4 guys, look at the main customers that you have. Mm-hmm. And what do they do? Are they commercial property managers? Are you doing residential? Are you doing automotive? What is it you're doing? Figure out which one you actually make money on or which one you enjoy, to your point, Tone. And then figure out, how do I reach them? I'll tell you right now, the answer is not more Google AdWords. Yeah. If you want to get in with commercial property managers, Google AdWords is not... It is a waste of your money. Mm-hmm. It's talk to them, sit down with them, figure out what pain points they have, take that and go to the next one. Figure out what they have. I would really try and hone in on a niche. Yeah. Because that's find your profit center and hone in on that niche. So that'd be number 3. We did that way too late. Mm-hmm. And what happens, what just made me think of the next one. But what happens is, you end up, I think I mentioned last episode, we end up painting a boat or sanding a boat up in the Northwest Territories, and we're wondering, how the hell did this happen?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and to your point, Uncle Glenn kind of challenged us all during the pandemic to go in and figure out, like, the question is, where's your primary customer base? What is the customer base that you service well? And everybody's going to give you their gut instinct. Well, you already have that information. Just go into your accounting software and look where your top 50 customers are, and don't spend a whole lot of time on it. Just sort it by sales, grab those, and then categorize those top 50 into, like you said, commercial property management, retail, restaurant, whatever.
HOA. Yeah.
HOA. Mm-hmm. Just broad categorizations, and then you'll identify pretty darn quick who you serve the best and who you enjoy doing work with, because you've already naturally adapted to those customers, and so that's why you have repeats on it. So once you identify that, then you can lean into it even more. Join the industry networks that they're associated with. Go to where they hang out, and that's how you can find out more of those pain points that they're focused on, the challenges that they're having, and then you can continue to get more saturated in that in that market.
I'm going to challenge that a bit, because especially if you're someone who comes in and is buying a business or stepping into a new business, just because you are dominant in one market doesn't mean that's the best market to be dominant in. So like you might be buying a business and historically the person might be very good with residential, or they might be really good with commercial property managers, and maybe you don't want to be focused on commercial property managers. So I would say that's one way to look at that, but also look at the market and figure out what are the markets you feel you're like. You mentioned the word niche, Lars. Like figure out your niche, and
I said niche.
Sure, whatever.
One of them's a word, niche. One of them's American.
Sorry. Figure out your niche and figure out what markets your niche is going to be best at. Like if you want to sell access control, like for example, locksmiths, right? Historically, you find them very heavy in HOAs. You find them very heavy with commercial property managers, but maybe you want to sell a different product, and that product isn't best to be sold in the niche that you currently are selling into.
So, Tom, can you explain to me why you would buy this business if you don't want to be in the niche that they're in?
That's a good question. It's a fair question.
I bought this business. They did a lot of residential, but we don't do residential.
Well, there might be other things that are valuable about that business.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Maybe you're starting. Yeah, I don't know.
You want to explain
I don't think that's the only end all be all.
Like, because
you've done business in a certain market in the past doesn't mean that you should continue doing business in that market going forward. It is an avenue for growth. I'm just saying it's not.
Yeah. This is. I can't believe it's taken me this long to get here, but I'm now starting to roll a little bit. The foundation of the 2X program. So give a shout out to the 2X program, because I know, Chad, you love name dropping everyone you can, but Medico and the Osabloy group, have the MSC network, pretty cool thing that they're doing. A bunch of business owners have put together, but there is a new program that they restarted. I think it started in the 80s. I think, Chad, you were the only one alive back then. But it was back when Ken had lots of hair. It was a foundation on how to double your business, right? Yeah, it was basically a how-to guide, and they've revitalized the program and started again last year. And one of the fundamental modules in the first iteration of the 2X program that Ken Kupperman still swears by was he narrowed his product scope or product variety offering. That's the word. Thank you. So Ken, when he needed deadbolts, this is what he sold. He only sold Medico. He only sold LSDA. He only sold like specific products.
Oh, that's true.
That's true. And he only bought it from one supplier. And he really built up purchasing power and relationships with the one supplier, because that, one, made it simple, and two, increased his profitability just by building that relationship and made it simple. Like every episode I have to go back and reference the machine. Again, what you're going to be tempted in a new business is if somebody says, oh, hey, I need these locks rekeyed, but also I need to repair a window. And you're like, oh yeah, well, window, how hard could that be? I'll just, I'll do the window too, because you want the business, right? You want the business. And before you know it, you're sanding boats in the Northwest Territory. So I go back to Alan, and Alan's very direct. This is what we sell. That's it. If you don't like that, you go somewhere else. So he and Ken both have that kind of similar mindset where it's, you find that product offering and you stick to it. Stay narrow, because in 4 generations of your company, what you're going to find is it makes training easier, it makes onboarding easier, it makes purchasing easier, it makes payables easier. Everything is easier because you only have a selection of a small selection of your product offering. So that would be something I would be doing early on. And that was a mistake we made. We sell everything under the sun.
Yeah, because once you get further down that path, it's hard to reverse it.
Yeah. The next thing you know, you have 18 different medical keyways, right? And it's a mess.
Another thing I would add to the list, and I don't know if it's at 5 employees, but sooner than later, again, you don't want it to get too messy, is figure out your processes. So you figure out your products, figure out what you're selling, figure out how you're going to make that happen, and start getting it documented, because that's a mistake we made. We grew a bunch and had no refined processes, and certainly didn't have any of them documented. And then you get to a point where you're trying to play catch up, and that's not a fun place to catch up from. So I think at a smaller, as hard as it is, because you want to go out and you want to service those locks. As hard as it is, sit down and start documenting somewhere, whether it's recording a video of yourself doing it, or getting somebody to put stuff on paper for you, or putting it on paper yourself. But make sure you start figuring out what your core processes are, and make sure you have them documented, because if you get too big, it's harder to catch up.
Yeah, if you're more tech savvy, I'll reference Scribe. Scribe.io just records your screen and does that. Another good tool is Loom. Loom's a bookmark I have. I can see on my computer right now, but Loom does a video of your screen. You can do a voiceover and talk through how to do that processy. But I even to this day, we have pieces of paper taped on the wall, and then as something comes up, we just walk over with a pen or a pencil and write it in. We'll later update it and make it look pretty, but the main thing is just start doing it.
Yeah.
Right. Don't wait to, okay, on Friday, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do this. Just as it comes up, get it done, because lots of us, this isn't natural. And so we'll push it off. Make it easy. Make it easy to do those. And I mean, literally we have an organization of 70 or 80 people. We have 9 different companies, and still you walk into our boardroom, there's pieces of paper taped on the wall with pencil scratch on it.
Yeah.
Chad, you're awfully quiet over there. Anything going on?
Yeah. Documenting processes is huge. And again, to what you were saying, don't overthink how you're documenting. I think that one of the mistakes I've made early on was failure to document, because I feared that if we had to have a place for it to land. And if we didn't have a good place for it to land, then it was going to get lost. And so it forced us, it basically pushed that process down, or pushed that task down until we could find a good place for it to happen. Yeah. What I learned through the process was, and the way we ultimately did it was we brought a core group of people together once a week, and we identified, and we just did sticky notes. It took us 45 minutes a week. We had sticky notes on the wall that we would just title a process that needed to be documented. Yep. And then everybody in the room would have an opportunity to vote on each of those processes to see which one was the most important to document. And then once we did that, we would vote on the top 3, and then we would assign those top 3 to each either teams or individuals, and then they would bring that process back documented the next week. Yeah. Here's the valuable thing that we learned out of it through the process. Most every single process that was documented within that week, when they brought it back, there was a keen awareness that it was a terrible process that needed to be fixed. And so we not only documented it, but then we fixed the process, shrunk it down, deleted a bunch of unnecessary steps, and had it either automated or redocumented for a better process. And we went through that for the course of about a year, and we're diligent about it. Every Wednesday morning for about 45 minutes, we just muddled through that, and we employed multiple people to be able to be involved. So it wasn't reliant upon me or one other person to document it. It was the person actually doing it. So, and that was years before we have a lot of the voice to text and the tools that you were mentioning. But Gemini, ChatGPT, any of those things, you can literally just talk into it and say, create a SOP. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, and I need you to document it in an SOP format. And it'll kick it out for you. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort now. The resources are so much easier. Right.
And I when I was snooping around in the office when I was there last week, I saw your I don't know if you call them the innovation team.
Yep.
But they still have the on the wall. They still have the sticky notes of the different things they're working on in the 3 different segments, and that's still a viable thing. Anyone that's interested in getting an idea, what you're referring to, I think, is the IDEO method. It's IDEO. If you go to YouTube, it was a consulting firm. I think IDEO might still be a consulting firm, but they talk about the process, how they do exactly that, and it's very similar.
Yeah. It's a process that I learned through going to other conferences and seeing it happen in real time. I'm like, wow, that is a practical application that we can put in our business. It's not going to cost. It costs the amount of a stack of sticky notes and
Post-it note.
Sharpies.
It's $3. Post-it note. Stick it on the wall, and it's really easy, and it's a good fun activity because obviously having people involved. I think you mentioned this, Chad. Having the people involved that are actually doing the process.
Yep.
They'll be engaged and they'll take it on. It'll be theirs, right? They'll own it. So
and you find out too what the biggest hurdles are inside the business, because you may sit there and go, well, I think we need this process document, or we need to fix this thing, and you may be a little clouded just based off of your perspective. But when you get your actual employees involved, they're going to tell you, here's the things that we struggle with. We can't get this done consistently every time. We need to document it. But we've done that in our conference room. We have a document set up with a piece of paper that's laminated on the wall that says this is what the conference room is supposed to look like when it's set up. At any point, anybody in our organization can walk into that room and know exactly, without any details, just go look at that picture on the wall and follow the instructions, and they can set up the conference room. So now that typically, and here's call back to what we were talking about earlier, that typically fell to one person's responsibility or 2 people's responsibility. Well, now that is limiting that task. So that if that person takes on 1 or 2 or 3 more other things, now that simple thing of getting the conference room set up falls. Well, now once it's documented once and it's very clear to follow the instructions, anybody, you can, we just had a new team member start 2 weeks ago. If he's sitting around and doesn't have anything to do, hey, get the conference room set up for Wednesday, follow these instructions. It's easy. And so now that's a very simple task that you can point to. But if you think across how many tasks inside your business, this is where we keep the key blanks. This is how we restock the keyboard. This is how we check these parts in, whatever. They're actually pretty simplistic documented things, but it's intrinsical in someone's mind, the way that they do it. Well, if you can get it documented, then you bring more people into the process, and it is done more consistently every single time. And it just takes, the old adage, people get so frustrated because they say, I don't have time to document the process. And you waste so much time not doing
explaining it 500,000 times instead.
And you're limiting other people's involvement because it is now forcing you to be the only person that can do it when it's not something that only you can do.
Well, and the longer you wait, the messier it gets. Now all of a sudden you have Jerry over here doing things one way and Jeannie over here doing things another way. And all of a sudden you have 3-4 people doing things differently. And now you have to decide, okay, what is the right way? As opposed to deciding the way up front. And that way can morph through time, but there's got to be consistency into how people are doing things.
So just as a summarization, based off of my key notes here that we have, is if you were to either purchase a business or you have a business that's 5-6 employees and you're figuring out what are the first few things that I need to do. Number one that you were talking about was pricing, figuring out how you're going to price things, flat rate versus hourly rate.
Make it
having
simple
consistency
to tell people and your staff what it costs to do blank.
All right. Focus on education for profitability,
understanding how you make money,
and where understanding how you make money, where the expenses are, because most small businesses aren't charging enough and they're spending too much money.
Correct.
Then move that over to identifying your core customers, the areas of your business that you're making the most money on. And finding ways you can get to their pain point faster. And then I think one of the things here was KRAs, or identify the things that only you can do. Identify where you're spending your time. Identify the things that only you can do, and then process documentation. Document things fast and effectively so that more than one person can do them correctly.
You forgot the most important thing. Where are we going?
Creating a vision, setting a direction of where we're headed. I like it. So that's the summary that I have here. I think that's a lot of work for somebody that's got 5 or 6 employees, but that it is I think a good list. If you can activate those things and start working on them, you're going to see accelerated growth.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily have to do all that yourself. You have 5, 6 team members. Delegate each one of those things to somebody. Say, hey, I want you spending 80% of your time doing your normal role, and I want you spending a day a week helping me with these things. Delegate that out. Start delegating from the start. Otherwise, you're just going to get behind.
Good advice. Good topic, Tony. I know you have another topic for us for our next episode. Before we jump into that, just a reminder, this episode, as well as all of the other ones that we have, are available whatever platform you're listening on. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can go through the entire playlist and see all of the videos. Should definitely check out the last episode when we were all together in the studio. It was great, wonderful. And then we don't have our shop up yet. That's one thing I forgot. We've got to get our shop for our merch so that you can order coffee cups and T-shirts.
We do have a blog, Chad.
We have a... You can find our blog at unlockedpodcast.com. That has been up since episode 1. I can't believe I haven't mentioned it before this episode. And
I'm sure you have multiple times. You just didn't click on his.
I generally turn off when Chad starts talking.
Yeah.
And you can subscribe on all the podcast platforms. You can find us there. Make sure you're checking us out. New episode every Thursday morning, ready for you to kick off the final 2 days of your week.
Yeah, if you have anything to add, any questions, any comments, any feedback, by all means, reach out on the socials. We tend to get several, if not, we're probably getting closer to 10 or 12 or 15 every week. People reaching out, comments. Yep. Some good, mostly me regarded. Some good, and then we talk about you guys every once in a while. It's great to hear. It's great to hear that there's some people that are listening and enjoying some of this. So it's cool, and we'd like to help whenever we can. I'll give you my 2 cents.
Yeah, it seems like it's resonating with a lot of other business owners, a lot of business operators, and even people that are just in the industry, understanding kind of both sides of the equation. No matter where you're at in the industry, at least here's a perspective that we are working through in real time. So very cool. Yeah. Tony, what's our next topic that we're going to
terrible topic? Tony, let's go.
I'm sure you guys will hate this topic because you hate most things I say. But
go ahead and set us up for success. Retail
stores. What is their place in the world of 2025? I know that's a polarizing topic. I don't think there's a lot of questions around what is the value of retail locksmithing. So I want to get into that a bit.
We've got a list of 40 or 50 topics, and this is one.
Yes. As I said, I'm sure no matter what I say, you're going to dislike, but that's what we're going with.
Okay.
For what it's worth, this one is on that list. So,
Tony, would you care to take a mulligan on that topic?
Nope. I like it.
All right.
I'm intrigued by it.
The role of retail in 2025.
Yeah.
Womp womp. Okay, well, folks, stay tuned for that. That sounds exciting.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next week
to discuss retail stores in 2025.
Woo!
Tony.
And in all fairness, it is a huge investment.
Yes. Yeah, and I think there is value there. I think it's a big unknown. I mean, there's a lot you can do with a retail locksmith. Lock shop. From an expansion strategy, do you keep the retail? Do you close it? There's plenty to talk about with retail.